I can't breathe. My chest tightens as I press my back against the cold, damp wall. The air smells of rotting wood and something else. Something metallic, sharp, like blood left too long in the heat. I'm gripping my phone with shaking hands, the dim glow barely cutting through the suffocating darkness. But it's useless. No signal, no help. Footsteps echo through the narrow hallway ahead, slow and deliberate, each step reverberating like a countdown to my death. My pulse pounds in my ears as I clamp a hand over my mouth, trying to silence the ragged gasps betraying my terror. Whoever, whatever, is out there knows I'm here. I feel it watching, its presence thick and oppressive, like shadows crawling. Under my skin, a sudden guttural scraping sound, metal dragging against concrete makes my stomach lurch. It's coming closer. The darkness shifts, twisting into something solid, something alive. I'm frozen, paralyzed by fear, until instinct kicks in. Run. I push off the wall and sprint blindly down the hallway, heart slamming against my ribs. Behind me, the footsteps quicken, and then a whisper, impossibly close, brushing against my ear like icy breath. You can't escape. It had been a week since I moved into the old house on Ravenwood Lane, a secluded, crumbling structure surrounded by thick woods that swallowed most of the afternoon sunlight. The decision to leave the city wasn't exactly mine. It was a necessary escape after the collapse of my marriage and the financial wreckage that followed. I needed isolation, time to think, to rebuild. The realtor had smiled too widely when she handed me the keys, brushing off my concerns about the house's state, with promises that it had character. Character in this case meant creaking floorboards, drafty windows, and an unsettling atmosphere that clung to every room like cobwebs. The first few days were uneventful, if lonely. I spent most of my time unpacking boxes, rearranging furniture, and making half-hearted attempts to clean the thick layer of dust that seemed determined to reclaim every surface. Nights, however, were different. The silence here wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive. The kind that made you hyper-aware of every creak, rustle, and whisper of wind. It started with small things, barely noticeable at first. The kitchen light flickered occasionally, which I chalked up to faulty wiring. I'd find doors slightly ajar that I was certain I had closed. The old wooden staircase groaned, as though someone were walking on it when I was upstairs alone. I laughed it off, blaming the quirks of an aging house. But then there were the shadows. I first noticed them late one night while reading in the living room. The fire had burned low, casting long, flickering shapes on the walls. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a quick, darting figure just beyond the edge of the light. My heart skipped, but when I turned my head, there was nothing there. Just shadows dancing with the fire. Get a grip, I muttered to myself, shaking off the unease. It's just your imagination. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. One morning, I woke to find the front door wide open, swaying gently in the breeze. My stomach knotted as I stared at it, the realization sinking in. I had locked it the night before. I double-checked, even jiggled the handle to make sure it was secure, and yet, here it was, open as though inviting something, or someone, inside. Maybe I'd forgotten. Maybe stress was messing with my memory. I tried to convince myself, but doubt lingered. The following night, I dreamt of the house. In the dream, the walls pulsed like a living, breathing thing. The windows were black voids, and something I couldn't see but could feel, watched me from the shadows. I woke drenched in sweat, heart racing, the taste of fear bitter on my tongue. Sleep became elusive after that. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind outside, set my nerves on edge. I began leaving lights on, hoping to banish the shadows that seemed to creep closer with each passing night. Then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, indistinct murmurs that I attributed to the wind. But as the nights wore on, they grew clearer. Words I couldn't quite understand, spoken in a voice that was both distant and unbearably close. I'd sit up in bed, straining to hear, my breath shallow and quick. One night I finally worked up the courage to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and a pounding heart, I crept through the house, searching for the source of the sound. The beam of light wavered as my hands trembled, casting eerie shapes on the walls. Nothing. Just the hollow emptiness of an old house. "It's in your head," I whispered to myself, trying to steady my nerves. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. By day, the house seemed almost normal, quiet, even charming in its dilapidated way. But as dusk fell, a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy blanket. The woods outside grew darker, the trees twisting into sinister shapes against the fading light. And the house seemed to come alive, its walls breathing, its shadows stretching. I started keeping a journal, hoping that writing down my experiences would help me make sense of them. Flipping through the pages now, I noticed a pattern. The disturbances were growing more frequent, more intense, and there was something else, something I hadn't consciously acknowledged until now. A name, scrawled in the margins of several entries, written in my own shaky handwriting, but without memory of doing so. Ravenwood. I stared at the name, a chill creeping down my spine. What did it mean? Why had I written it? The more I tried to remember, the foggier my thoughts became, as though something was actively erasing my memories. Desperation clawed at me. I needed answers. I decided to visit the town library the next day, hoping to find some history about the house or the area that might explain the strange occurrences. But as night fell once again, I realized that I might not make it to morning. The whispers returned louder this time, echoing through the house like a sinister chorus. The shadows danced on the walls, growing darker, denser, and then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving through the hallway just outside my bedroom door. My breath caught in my throat as I gripped the edge of the bed, every muscle in my body tensed. The door handle rattled once, twice, then fell still. Silence. Waited, heart thudding painfully against my ribs. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had lost all meaning. Finally, I released a shaky breath, thinking it was over. And then, just as I began to relax, a voice spoke from the darkness. "Ravenwood is waiting." The library visit never happened. Something kept me inside the house, a gnawing dread that curled in the pit of my stomach the moment I touched the doorknob. I wanted to leave, to run, but my legs refused to move. It was as if the house had tightened its grip on me, whispering that escape was impossible. I spent the entire day pacing the living room, fingers brushing over the fraying edges of the sofa, cushions, heart thudding with an unrelenting anxiety I couldn't shake. The journal lay open on the coffee table, pages fluttering despite the closed windows. I'd stopped writing. There was no point. Whatever story Ravenwood had to tell was already writing itself in my head. The night crept in slowly, smothering the pale winter sun. I watched the light drain from the room, shadows pooling in the corners like black ink. I turned on every light I could find, the electric hum barely masking the rising tension in the air. That was when it started. A soft, rhythmic knocking, steady and patient, like a visitor waiting to be invited in. It wasn't coming from the front door. No, this sound echoed through the walls themselves as if the house had grown a heartbeat. I froze, every nerve on edge, listening intently. "Knock, knock, knock." "It's just the pipes," I whispered, though my voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. Old house noises. The knocking stopped abruptly, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. I exhaled shakily, trying to steady myself, but relief was short-lived. From the kitchen came the unmistakable sound of glass shattering, sharp and violent, cutting through the quiet like a scream. Adrenaline surged through me as I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy, rusted fire poker, and crept toward the kitchen. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, shadows flickering as the dim light from the living room struggled to keep them at bay. My breath hitched as I stepped into the kitchen doorway. The shattered glass sparkled like a frozen galaxy across the floor, shards glinting in the faint light. The window above the sink was intact, no sign of anything that could have caused the break. But then I saw it. In the reflection of the kitchen window, just behind me, a figure stood shrouded in darkness. I spun around, heart leaping into my throat, but there was nothing there, just empty space. A cold sweat slicked my skin as I stumbled backward, nearly slipping on the glass. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out all rational thought. I wanted to run, to escape this suffocating nightmare, but my legs felt like lead. Then came the whisper, soft and insidious, curling around my senses like smoke. "You're not alone." The words slithered through the air, chilling me to the bone. I clenched the fire poker tighter, knuckles turning white. "Who's there?" I demanded, voice trembling despite my attempt at bravery. Silence. The oppressive weight of the house pressed down on me, thick and suffocating. I took a shaky step forward, heart hammering against my ribs, and then the lights flickered. Once, twice, before plunging the entire house into darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone, the screen casting a pale blue glow over my trembling hands. I turned on the flashlight, the narrow beam cutting through the shadows. "This isn't real," I whispered desperately, trying to convince myself. "It's just stress. You're imagining things." But deep down, I knew the truth. Something was here. I backed toward the living room, the fire poker still clutched in my hand. The beam of light trembled as I swept it across the walls, searching for I didn't know what. The whisper returned, louder this time, echoing from every corner of the house. "We've been waiting for you." My breath caught in my throat as the walls seemed to close in around me. The air grew thick, heavy with the stench of decay. Shadows twisted and writhed, shapes forming and dissolving just beyond the edge of the light. And then, a hand. Cold and clammy, it brushed against my arm, sending a jolt of terror through me. I yelped, spinning around, but the hand was gone. I stumbled backward, heart racing, sweat pouring down my face. The knocking resumed, louder and more insistent. Knock, knock, knock. My vision blurred as panic overtook me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The house was alive, a living nightmare that refused to let me go. I had to get out. Fumbling with the front door lock, I twisted and pulled desperately, but it wouldn't budge. The walls groaned, the very structure of the house seeming to shift and warp around me. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices blending into a maddening chorus. "Stay," they commanded. "Stay with us." "No," I screamed, slamming my shoulder against the door with all my strength. It gave way suddenly, and I stumbled out into the cold night air, gasping for breath. Silence. The house loomed behind me, dark and still, as though nothing had happened. But I knew better. The thing inside wasn't finished with me, and neither was Ravenwood. The night that followed was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Sleep became an impossibility. Every time I closed my eyes, images of that cold, clammy hand brushing my arm played on a relentless loop. The whispers lingered in my ears, even though the house had returned to its unsettling silence. I told myself it was just a trick of the mind, stress compounded by loneliness. Maybe I was finally cracking under the pressure of living alone in this decaying nightmare of a house. But rational explanations lost their weight as time stretched on and reality began to warp. The first sign that something was deeply wrong came just before dawn. I stood in the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face, trying to wash away the fog of fear that clung to me. When I looked up, my reflection wasn't looking back. It was still me, the same tangled hair and pale skin. But the eyes were wrong. They weren't blinking when I blinked. They just stared, wide and unblinking, as though something else was inside watching me. A chill crawled down my spine. "It's not real," I muttered under my breath, gripping the edges of the sink until my knuckles turned white. "You're just seeing things." But my reflection disagreed. The lips in the mirror curled into a sinister smile, completely independent of my own frozen expression. I stumbled back, heart hammering wildly, as the reflection leaned forward, pressing its face against the glass as though it wanted to break free. And then, nothing. The mirror was normal again, showing only my trembling form. I fled the bathroom, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I needed air, needed space, but the house seemed determined to suffocate me. The walls loomed closer, shadows flickering even though there was no light source to cast them. Voices began to whisper from the corners of the room, just out of reach. Faint and indistinct at first, they grew louder, more insistent. "Why are you still here? Leave, or stay forever." I clamped my hands over my ears, but the voices only burrowed deeper into my mind. They knew me, knew my fears and secrets, and they wielded them like weapons. Then came the hallucinations, or at least I hoped they were hallucinations. I saw figures darting through the periphery of my vision, quick and shadowy like specters, flitting between dimensions. The walls of the house shifted subtly, the floorboards groaning under invisible weight. Time itself seemed to fracture. Minutes stretched into hours, and I lost track of how long I had been trapped in this waking nightmare. Desperate for answers, I returned to the journal. Maybe there was something I'd missed, some clue that could explain what was happening. The pages felt different under my fingertips, slick and cold, as though they had absorbed the fear permeating the house. A new entry had appeared, one I hadn't written. "You're not imagining this." I stared at the words, dread pooling in my stomach. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages, finding more messages scrawled in jagged handwriting. "We've been waiting. She's watching you. There is no escape." Tears pricked my eyes as I slammed the journal shut. This couldn't be real. None of it could be real. But the line between reality and madness was blurring rapidly, and I was losing my grip. The moral dilemma came when the voices changed their tone, becoming sweet, persuasive. "You don't have to be afraid," one voice cooed. "We can help you." "Let us in," another urged, softer but insistent. "All you have to do is say yes." A terrible understanding dawned on me. Whatever entity had infested this house wanted something from me, my consent, my surrender. The whispers promised freedom, but I knew instinctively that it was a lie. If I gave in, I would never leave this place. My hands clenched into fists. "No," I whispered through gritted teeth. "I won't." The house responded violently. The walls shuddered, the floor buckling beneath my feet. Wind howled through the rooms, though every window remained tightly shut. Objects flew off shelves, shattering against the walls. The voices rose to a deafening crescendo, screaming my name over and over. I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face as I fought to hold on to my sanity. "Leave me alone," I screamed, my voice raw with desperation. And then, silence. The chaos stopped abruptly, leaving me gasping for breath in the wreckage of my living room. The house had gone still, but I knew better than to think it was over. A new realization gripped me. I couldn't stay here. The house wanted me broken, defeated. If I remained, it would consume me entirely. I had to make a choice: stay and face whatever horrors awaited, or risk fleeing into the unknown darkness outside. My mind raced, weighing the options. Leaving might mean freedom, but it could also mean running straight into the clutches of whatever malevolent force had claimed this place. Staying was no better. The house had made its intentions clear. There was no right answer, only a gamble. With my life as the stakes, I forced myself to my feet, determination hardening in my chest. Whatever happened next, I would fight. I wouldn't let this house or the thing inside it win. The whispers returned, softer now, almost pleading. "Don't go." I ignored them, stepping over the shattered remnants of my belongings as I made my way toward the front door. The house groaned in protest, but I didn't look back. I had made my choice. The door refused to budge. My heart sank as I twisted the knob furiously, the cold brass biting into my palm. No matter how hard I yanked, the door held fast, as though welded shut by some unseen force. I kicked it in frustration, the thud echoing uselessly through the suffocating stillness. Panic clawed at my throat. The walls seemed closer now, leaning inward like eager spectators. Shadows danced across their surfaces, shifting and twisting with a life of their own. A whisper curled through the air behind me, soft but unmistakable. "Leaving so soon?" I spun around, fire poker raised defensively, but the hallway was empty. The voice, smooth and mocking, lingered like smoke in my ears. My pulse thundered as I scanned the shadows, every instinct screaming at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The lights flickered violently, casting the room in a strobe-like nightmare. For brief, terrifying moments, the walls seemed translucent, revealing writhing shapes just beneath their surface. Dark tendrils slithered across the ceiling, disappearing as quickly as they appeared. And then I saw it, standing at the far end of the hallway, partially obscured by flickering shadows, was a figure, tall and grotesquely elongated. Its limbs were unnaturally thin, joints bending at impossible angles. Its head tilted unnervingly to the side, as if studying me with cruel amusement. It didn't move. Neither did I. My breath hitched, the primal terror rooting me to the spot. The air thickened, heavy with the stench of decay. I wanted to look away, to unsee the abomination before me, but my gaze was locked on its twisted form. Then, it took a step. The floorboards creaked beneath its weight, an impossibility given its skeletal frame. The sound echoed like a death knell, each step deliberate and slow. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet as I retreated toward the living room. "Stay," it whispered, though its mouth never moved. The voice reverberated inside my skull, insidious and commanding. "You've always been here." My back hit the wall, jolting me out of my paralysis. Adrenaline surged through my veins, overriding the numbing fear. I darted to the side, heart racing as I made a desperate dash for the stairs. If I could reach the attic, maybe I'd find a way out. A window, anything. The creature's footsteps quickened behind me, each thud resonating like a hammer striking wood. I didn't dare look back. Reaching the staircase, I vaulted up the steps two at a time, the banister slick with sweat from my trembling hands. The narrow hallway at the top stretched impossibly long, the attic door a distant speck in the darkness. "You can't escape," the voice taunted. "Closer now." I forced myself forward, lungs burning with every gasping breath. The attic door loomed, ahead, slightly ajar, a glimmer of hope in this nightmare. Just a few more steps. The floor beneath me buckled without warning, wood splintering as the hallway warped and twisted. I fell hard, pain lancing through my side as I hit the ground. Dazed, I struggled to push myself up, but the floorboards writhed beneath my palms like living flesh. The creature's shadow loomed over me, stretching grotesquely across the walls. I crawled backward, desperation driving me even as terror threatened to consume me. "Why fight?" it hissed, voice dripping with malice. "You've been here before. You'll be here again." The words struck a chord deep within me, a sickening sense of déjà vu. Fragments of memories flickered at the edges of my consciousness, moments I couldn't fully grasp but felt in my bones. I had seen this hallway before, run from this creature before. This wasn't the first time. A surge of defiance cut through, the haze of fear. I wasn't going to let this thing win. Clenching my teeth, I lunged for the fire poker, still clutched in my trembling hand. The metal felt reassuringly solid despite the chaos around me. The creature lunged, its elongated arms stretching toward me like grotesque tendrils. I swung the poker with all my strength, the impact sending a shockwave up my arm. The creature recoiled, a guttural screech ripping through the air. Seizing the moment, I scrambled to my feet and bolted for the attic door. The hallway shifted and warped, walls narrowing as though trying to swallow me whole. My shoulder slammed against the doorframe as I threw myself through the opening. Darkness enveloped me. The attic was cold and silent, the air thick with dust and decay. I fumbled for the light switch, fingers brushing against cobwebs before finally finding it. A single flickering bulb cast a dim glow over the cluttered space. Boxes and forgotten relics filled the room, their shapes distorted by shadows. The wooden floor creaked beneath my weight as I moved cautiously, every instinct on high alert. "It's not over," the voice whispered, echoing through the attic. I tightened my grip on the fire poker, heart pounding wildly. The creature was still here, somewhere. Its presence pressed against me like a physical weight, suffocating and relentless. And then I saw it. At the far end of the attic, just beyond the reach of the flickering light, the creature waited. Its form was even more grotesque in the dim glow, limbs contorted into impossible angles. Its eyes, black and endless, bored into me with a malevolent hunger. "You can't leave," it said, the words reverberating through the space. "This is where you belong." I took a shaky step forward, determination hardening my resolve. "You're wrong," I whispered, more to myself than to the creature. "I'm not staying." The creature tilted its head, a grotesque parody of curiosity. "We'll see," it said. With a sudden burst of speed, it lunged toward me, a blur of darkness and twisted limbs. I braced myself, fire poker raised, ready to fight. And then, everything shattered. The attic, the creature, the oppressive darkness, all of it fragmented like broken glass, dissolving into nothingness. I was falling, tumbling through an endless void. When I hit the ground, the impact knocked the air from my lungs. Gasping, I opened my eyes to find myself back in the living room. This house was silent. I staggered to my feet, disoriented and shaken. The front door stood ajar, pale morning light streaming through the opening. Had it all been a hallucination? A nightmare? But as I took a hesitant step forward, something caught my eye. A single, blackened handprint marred the wall beside the door, a chilling reminder that the nightmare was far from over. And deep down, I knew the truth. I had been here before, and I would be here again. The silence in the room grew suffocating, heavy like the air before a storm. I didn't know how much more I could take. My heart raced, thumping in my chest like a frantic prisoner trying to break free. Sweat ran down my back, my skin crawling with the fear of what was to come. Whatever this was, this thing that had followed me, trapped me, haunted me, was closing in. I had thought I could outrun it. I had thought that if I just kept moving, kept fighting, I'd find a way out. But no matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, I always ended up right back here. The room, the house, the corridors. It was all a maze, a cruel, mocking puzzle that never let me escape. I had been so sure, so certain, that there had to be a way out. But now, as the shadows crept deeper into the corners of my vision, I realized something I hadn't fully accepted before. The thing, the entity that had been haunting me, it wasn't just out there. It was inside me. A sudden shift in the air made my skin prickle. The temperature dropped by degrees, and the silence that had been swallowing me whole became deafening. My breath hitched in my throat. Something was coming. I could feel it, see it in the way the shadows danced and shifted, the way the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. And then I heard it. A whisper, soft, like a breeze passing through the cracks in the walls, but unmistakable. It wasn't my imagination. I wasn't imagining things. It spoke my name. Rachel. I froze, unable to move, my mind scrambling for some way to process what was happening. But there was no escaping this. No escape. Rachel. It repeated, the voice now more distinct, closer, as though it was standing right behind me. I whirled around, but there was nothing there. Just the suffocating darkness, the hollow air. But that was enough. That was all I needed to know. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. I stumbled backward, colliding with the wall, my heart pounding. There was nowhere to go, no way out. And that's when I understood. It wasn't just hunting me, it had been waiting for me. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. I'd been running in circles, chasing my own tail. I wasn't being haunted. I was the one haunting this place. The thing wasn't after me. It had been trying to make me see the truth, to break me down until I could finally admit it. I hadn't escaped because there was no escape. There had never been any. I wasn't trapped here because of some malevolent force. I was trapped because I had made a choice. I had always been here. The air seemed to crackle with energy as a low, guttural laugh echoed through the space. It wasn't human, or anything close to it. It was deep, ancient, and mocking. My stomach twisted, My chest tightened. I could feel my breath coming in shallow gasps, my throat dry and tight. It knew. It knew I had figured it out. I wasn't just running from something. I was running from myself. The dark figure emerged slowly from the corner, just beyond the reach of the dim light. It was tall, taller than any human should be. Its form was obscured, shifting and flickering like smoke, but I could make out the outline of something impossibly wrong, something that defied the laws of nature. It stepped forward, its presence oppressive, suffocating. "Do you understand now, Rachel?" the voice hissed, echoing from every direction at once. "This is where you belong. This is where it all ends." I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My throat felt like it was being crushed, squeezed by invisible hands. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My thoughts were scrambled and I couldn't focus. Everything in me screamed to get away, to break free from whatever this was, but I was trapped in an endless loop. It was too late for me. "No," I gasped, forcing the word out through clenched teeth, my voice a hollow, desperate rasp. "This isn't real. This isn't me." But the thing didn't answer. Instead, it began to step closer, its shadow extending, wrapping itself around me like a shroud. It moved so fluidly, so unnaturally, that I couldn't tear my eyes away from it, or the way its form twisted and writhed, the shape contorting like something trying to break free from a cage. It wasn't just a creature. It was the manifestation of everything I had buried, everything I had tried to escape from. And then it hit me. The truth I had been running from. I had never escaped. The events, the moments, the fear. It had all been part of a cycle I could never break free from. The house, the shadows, the fear. It wasn't just some supernatural force. It was me. I had been the one causing all of it. Every terrifying moment, every broken piece of my mind had been the result of my own brokenness. Had never left. The figure stepped forward, and this time I couldn't avoid it. It was right in front of me, its presence overwhelming, suffocating. It reached out, and my body trembled, unable to move. "It's time to wake up." The words weren't spoken. They were felt, deep within my bones, vibrating through every fiber of my being. Suddenly, the world around me began to distort. The walls warped, bending at unnatural angles. The air shimmered, as though everything was being sucked into a vortex. My vision blurred, and my body felt weightless, like I was floating in space, detached from the reality I had once known. And then, the darkness took me. I fell, falling through nothingness, spiraling endlessly, knowing that there was no end, no escape. Just endless falling, endless spiraling into the depths of my own mind. And then, I woke up. I woke up with a start, gasping for air, my heart pounding against my chest. The world around me was familiar yet foreign. The room, the walls, the quiet hum of the house, it all felt like something I should have known, something I had known. But something was off. I rubbed my eyes, blinking against the harsh light of morning creeping through the blinds. Everything was too still, too perfect, like it had been wiped clean. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. The weight of exhaustion clung to me, as if I hadn't slept in days, as if I hadn't slept at all. I stumbled to the window and pulled back the curtain, gazing out at the street below. The same trees, the same houses, the same stillness. It was the same world, yet nothing felt right. My hand gripped the edge of the windowsill, knuckles white as I tried to make sense of the confusion swirling in my mind. The memories came rushing back. The darkness, the shadows, the figure that had followed me tormented me. But then, just as quickly as they came, they slipped away, fading like a bad dream I couldn't remember clearly. I shook my head, trying to shake the lingering unease that gnawed at me from the inside out. It had to be over. It had to be. But deep inside, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was still somewhere, stuck. The door to my room creaked open behind me. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat, but there was no one there. The air grew thick with the same suffocating silence I had felt before, the same oppressive heaviness. My mind screamed for answers, but there were no answers to be found. I turned back toward the window, and there, in the reflection of the glass, I saw it. A shadow, dark and long, stretched across the floor of the room. It was faint at first, just a flicker in the corner of my eye, but it grew longer, creeping toward me with a speed that made my stomach churn. I backed away from the window, my breath shallow, panic clawing at my chest. It couldn't be. It was over. I was free. But was I? The shadow reached the center of the room, and as it did, I saw something that made my blood freeze. An outline, a figure, standing in the reflection. My reflection. I turned, heart hammering, but there was nothing there. The room was empty. I looked back at the window, my reflection staring back at me with a hollow, empty gaze. And in that fleeting moment, I understood. I hadn't woken up. The room was the same. The house was the same. And that shadow, it had always been there. Was I still trapped? Was I still running? And if I was, what had changed? The reflection in the window smirked, and then the world went black.